As you likely know by now, we are well and truly on the road in all things Phase 4 of the MCU, and the latest offering from Marvel Studios was none other than Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, and you know this by now because you clicked on the video. Your boy's only gone and seen it, and he's got a few thoughts. And because I simply cannot help myself, here's your warning. Right now, you're getting it in your face. There's going to be spoilers here, because I've got to talk about all the things that happened in the film, all the really action-packed things, the emotional, just knife wounds to the chest, all these things, we need to talk about them, so spoilers, you've been warned. So first of all, we need to talk about the person who's on the marquee's face of all the things. Simu Liu playing Shang-Chi is unbelievable. This guy is... I think this is somebody who can build this entire MCU around going forward, and that feels sort of like the direction they may be going with after this film. Because we find out pretty early on that he had to run away from all of his life in the past. He couldn't be around his father, who's just an absolute madman. His mum, who, something bad had happened there, and his sister. He couldn't be a part of that life anymore, so he went away to America and, started this whole new life where Awkwafina's involved, Katie, his mate. They had a whole thing going on with the valets, and they're living the best lives, but then he just gets dragged back in, because just when you think you're out, they pull you back in. But in terms of his performance, just in general, he anchors this film. He's just a quiet force of resilience and conflictedness all the way through it, so he's going to get an up. This guy's got a big future in the MCU. And we're going to change our lens ever so slightly now. We're going to step back, because when we're going to talk about the cinematography of this film and everything it brings to the table, it is truly one of the most beautiful Marvel films we've ever had. That's across all the MCU, Sony, Fox, all of them, so that's going to get an up too. Because we have things like dragons, yes, dragons fighting demons in the middle of this mystical Narnia land. That happened, and that was truly amazing, but that is merely the tip of the iceberg. This film does not let up when it comes to its beautifully crafted choreography, just the sheer visuals, the animation, everything was pitch perfect. And I challenge you to find me another MCU film just in general that has combat that tells such a story like this film does. All the way through, every person's style of combat says a lot about them. There's some sequences where people fall in love while fighting. This is just that kind of film. But speaking of fighting, we do need to speak about a few negative things that probably come out of this film. It's one of the few negative points that I felt in the film, and it's just the baddies, I'd say, in general. You've got a really great top baddie in Tony Leung's father, mad Mandarin type person with his, rings. You learn the real history of the Mandarin and everything that comes with that, but him as a villain, as a stand-up top villain, fantastic. But when it comes to just all the kind of second-rate henchmen type people, they just don't really do much. There's a guy with a blade hand who fights Shang-Chi pretty early on. That's a whole thing on a bus, which is a brilliant sequence, but that's probably his defining moment. He changes allegiances pretty quick and all the rest of that. There's a guy with a painted face who trained Shang-Chi in all of his arts, and he gets dispatched like that. It's just not really great villain building, I'd say, in general, so we're going to give that a down. But if you came into this film thinking, I just want some MCU goodness hooked into my veins, we get plenty of that, because we get cameos from the likes of Abomination and Wong, and they're actually in the film probably a little bit longer than what I thought they'd be based on the trailer. You see them having a big fight in the big fighting pit, which is amazing. I love the fighting pit. I need to go back to there sometime soon. They had a little thing, and it looks like Wong was potentially training Abomination. You heard that right, but it's a really quick little scene, but they're involved in the film in general, as Wong pops up again later on in the day, more than I thought they'd be. And another person, huge spoiler here, that pops up in this film, none other than the OG Mandarin himself. No, not Aldridge Killian and whoever the hell that guy was. No, not him. Trevor Slattery. Trevor Slattery is in this film. And that's one of the parts of this film that jarred with me a little bit. I'll be honest, I absolutely adored this film pretty much from start to finish. But in terms of Trevor Slattery, you're going to hear a lot of, let's say, conflicting views about his appearance in the film. It didn't work for me. He was captured by, the Ten Rings after everything he did, being, posing as the Mandarin originally in Iron Man 3. He was captured and then made to perform Macbeth for them a couple times. And then he's just kind of shoehorned into the story from there on out as a bit of a cheap comedic relief character. And we kind of already had that in Awkwafina's character, and he's just there doing his Scouse accent, and it didn't really work for me, so that's going to get down. But in terms of the story itself, that's definitely going to get an up, because this takes us into places and parts of the MCU, both emotionally and just narratively, and locations, everything. It takes us into different realms, you could say, in more ways than one. Everything that goes down between Shang-Chi and his father, that entire relationship is so real. You feel every single part of it. You fully believe that his father loves him with all of his heart, but he just can't get over the fact that he needs to try and do this really devious act that he's trying to do towards the end of the film, where he's trying to pretty much bring Shang-Chi's mother back from the dead, because he thinks that she isn't dead and she's been taken captive by the village that she once lived in. It's a whole thing, but it's, oh, you believe it. I think Tony Leung himself has to have an up, because he doesn't really do Western films. He just doesn't, and he's popped up in this one, and he's very nearly stolen the entire show. It's like head in head with him and Simu Liu. Yeah, but in general, when you're talking about Tony Leung, I think in terms of straight up villains, I think you could probably call him the lead villain of this film, even though he's got so many layers, he's got so much depth. He's probably one of the best ones we've had in the MCU to date, in my personal opinion. So I only wish we could get more of him, but what happens in this film seems to suggest that's not going to happen. We're going to focus a little bit on the background / side characters in this film that kind of keep the whole ensemble moving on. And this is very reminiscent to Black Panther. We have all these incredibly strong, powerful female characters that are just... oh, they're given stuff to do. They're not just in the background doing nothing. They are given moments to really just flesh out their characters and be the driving force in the story, but they still just feel like they're pushing up the guy who's on the front of the poster, and it's just a bit of a letdown. In particular, Menga Zhang Ling in the film, who's obviously the sister of Shang-Chi, she's got this great arc where she's like, oh, I was abandoned by my brother, and then he finally comes back, and I've gone out and lived my own life, and I've got all this independence now. She's just kind of ushered slightly into the background when it comes to the big final fight, and she doesn't necessarily get her moment. I hope maybe going forward she gets a chance to do that, because I think she's brilliant. The actor's just fantastic as well. But in this film, it was a bit like, oh, really powerful character here, but shush, go and sit over there because it's Shang-Chi. I think tonally as well, this film just gets the right mix of when to lace in that comedy. I think that's something that's a criticism that's been levied at the MCU for, well, since its inception, really, that it tends to break up really emotional moments with needless one-liners and things like that. You don't really get that in Shang-Chi. Like, when something has to be emotional, it has to really hit home, they let it breathe. There's a heartbreaking moment in this film where someone's mother doesn't keep on breathing, and it's really heartbreaking, and it's very fresh. I just watched this film, it's very fresh in my heart. But that means a lot to me, because I think that in terms of the MCU, that's the thing that's always been its major, let's say, downside, that it just doesn't know when to stop when it comes to the ha, very funny. So that's going to get an up. Tonally, it was bang on for me. And I don't know if I've given this its own separate up, but I'm probably just going to do it anyway. But fights. I've said it once, I'm going to say it again. Fights. Some of the fights in this film, it's the way it slowly progresses. You start off from like little fights on trains, we're like, that's pretty cool. Then you go onto like the side of a building with bamboo structures holding it up, and that's all insane. And then we just ramp up to the climax where there's dragons, demons, and dragon arrows. This film rocks up. And then when it comes to the post-credit zingers, like the end scene and then the post-credit scene, there's loads of stuff that's going on there which seems to suggest that Shang-Chi is going to have a massive part to play in the MCU going forward. I will explain. Because none other than Bruce Banner and Carol Danvers pop up at the end to like examine the 10 rings that have been the most powerful force all the way through this film. They've been passed on from Shang-Chi's father to him. Now he has them. He's got these things around him. They're looking at them. They're like, oh, we can't understand where these were made, but we know that a beacon is being given off from it, so it's like making people see it, so something's probably going to come for the 10 rings, and everyone's like, dude, this is going to be crazy. So it seems to suggest that Shang-Chi could have a part to play potentially in Doctor Strange 2. I mean, Wong was heavily involved in this film. He seems to like have brought him into the Secret Sanctum and all that stuff, so he could have a major part in that. I just want to see more of Simu Liu, Awkwafina. I want to see them all, because the cast, the way this film was cast was to perfection. It really floated my boat. So that's been your very quick, fumbled, crazy, brain splurge Shang-Chi review from me, Gareth from WhatCulture.com. Let me know what you think of it in the comment section right down below. If you agree with these ups when you've seen it. If you don't agree with them, well, everyone's got their opinion, and mine is heavily influenced by the fact that I'm just wired on Shang-Chi goodness. Don't forget to like this video, share the video, and subscribe to all things WhatCulture.com, just on YouTube, Twitter, wherever you can find us. You can find me on Twitter at gmorgan04 and find WhatCulture on Twitter at WhatCulture. And more importantly than anything else, just have yourself the best day possible. And if you've not already, and you've just watched this entire video without watching Shang-Chi, what are you doing? Go watch this film. It's bloody good.